Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, a fun little resin project. Well, for those of you who are parents or grandparents, I'm sure that you've seen something that looks like this. And what this is you make up a salt dough. It's a mixture of salt, flour, and water, and you can color it as you wish and whatever, and the children can make something out of it. Well, in this case, it happens to be the handprint of my granddaughter. Now, it's not very prominent here. It's kind of difficult to see. You have to be looking at it at the right angle. She wasn't very cooperative that day. But these things disintegrate over time, and I'd like to keep this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a resin project. And it all starts off by making some clear resin rods. In order to make resin rods, you need a mold. And in this case, it's a plastic drinking straw. So in a scrap block of wood, I have drilled 4 holes here, the same diameter as the outside of our straw, and this is going to hold our straws in place while we fill them with resin. Now, just to prevent them from popping out or from moving, I'm just going to put a little dab of hot glue on each one just to keep it in place. And once that sets up, we can inject these with resin. And what we're going to use for that is an old syringe. So as I said, it's a pretty simple process. Once you get your epoxy mixed, you just want to suck some up into your syringe and then inject it into your straws. You don't need to fill them right to the top, but fill them as much as you can. And now we're going to get those into the pressure pot to get a really good clear casting. I've got quite a bit of resin dripped on my bench. Not to worry, a little bit of rubbing alcohol on a rag will clean that right up. While we're waiting for our rods to dry, we're going to make a mold to pour our resin in and seal in our little salt dough project. So I have some strips of scrap plexi here. They're 1 inch wide, and I'm going to make a heart-shaped mold. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't bend as much as I would like it to, so what I'm going to have to do here is I'm going to have to heat it up and form it to a 3/4 inch thick MDF heart that I have cut out. So I've made a couple clamping blocks, and we're just going to take it like that. I'm going to use a heat gun, slowly heat this up, and we'll form it around our heart. And now that we have 1/2 of our heart formed, I will form the other side, and then I'll come back and see you. And with our pieces of our mold cut, we're just going to assemble them. Now, there's not a lot of pressure that gets put on these pieces, so a little bit of Scotch tape or clear packing tape will do just fine. So we're just going to assemble this here, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so now that we have our heart mold taped together, I don't know how well that shows on film, but I'm going to place it now onto another piece of plexi, and we're going to use hot glue all the way around the base in order to seal it up and make our mold complete. Well, with the mold made, there's not much we can do until those resin rods are completely cured. So once they are, we'll see you for the next step. Well, our resin rods are dried, and I'm just going to cut off 4 1/4-inch long pieces. And once I get them cut, we will remove the straw casing on them. Well, what we have made essentially with these resin rods are clear pedestals for this craft to sit on. I don't want this sitting on the bottom so that, you know, I want it to be floating in the resin. And we're going to use the clear rod to raise it up that 1/4 inch in order to have it so that it's floating in there. And the clear resin rods out of the straw won't show in your resin pour, or at least if they do show, they'll be less noticeable. So I'm going to use a bit of CA glue. I'm going to glue these into 4 spots on the back of our craft here. And then what we're going to do is I want to measure up on our mold 3/4 inch and place a mark, and that will be the level of our pour. From there, all we need to do is mix up resin and pour it in place here in order to get our piece covered. Now you want to pour this slowly so that it has a chance to run underneath your craft piece here. So we're just going to pour it slowly around the perimeter and let it naturally just seep underneath our salt dough handprint. And once you're happy with the fact that it's got up underneath that, you can continue to pour until you get the right level in here. Now, I don't have enough resin, so I'm going to have to mix a second batch. You guys don't need a video of that. I'll mix a little more and pour it in to the proper level, and then we'll get this thing into the pressure pot and let it cure. Well, the pour is dry, and truth be told, what happened here was at some point in time, I had to trim down my back plate so that it fit in the pressure pot. And when I did that, I accidentally broke my glue gun seal, and quite a bit of the resin leaked out, which caused a really uneven surface on the top of my pour. It was no big deal. Once it cured, I just leveled up my mold inside the pressure pot, mixed up another small batch of resin, and just poured a skim coat over top to even it out, and it worked out just fine. So now we just have to crack this out of the mold. Well, truth be told here, although the sides separated just fine, the back I had some issues with, and it's because I used a thinner, older piece of plexi. It was a piece of scrap, and it just shattered as I was trying to remove it. So because of that, I've actually caused some damage to the back here. Now, also because it was so thin, it also caused this back to bow. So in order to correct both problems, I'm going to take this over to the belt sander, and I'm going to sand this flat and hopefully be able to smooth out this back surface. Now, I know that by doing this, it will probably make the back frosted, but I'll decide what to do about that later. Well, after the belt sander, I've taken 220 grit in a 1/4 sheet palm sander, and sanded the back, and I've also frosted the side edges. Frosting the side edges was part of the original plan, but having a frosted back was not. Although the front is still nice and clear, I think I'd like to have the back clear as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to polish this. And what I'm going to use to try, this is an experiment for me here, I'm going to try to use rubbing compound that you would use on your vehicle. So for the first step, I have some of this Meguiar's Mirror Glaze 105 Ultra Cut compound. It's the same stuff I use on my Jeep after off-roading, and I'm just going to apply a little bit here. Don't want too much because we don't want it to splatter everywhere. And using my drill and a buffer pad, we're going to work this in and see how we do. Now we're getting a little bit of splattering. I guess I put a little too much on. That's okay, just rub it in. You won't notice it. Let's give this a wipe and see how we're making out. Okay, so there's already a huge improvement from what it was with just the sanding. So I'm going to hit it with a little more of this compound, and then I'm going to put on some of this Ultra Finishing Polish, a number 205, again from Meguiar's, and we'll see how it comes up when we're done. And now a little bit of the polishing compound. Well, to finish this off, I'm just taking a micro abrasive pad, 12,000 grit, and wet sanding the top of this. That should really finish this off and give it a nice clear finish. So I guess the question here is, does rubbing and polishing compound work? Yeah, it does. And it did a great job. Now it's not as good as doing all the way through the micro meshes, but I think if I would have spent a little more time on it, I think I could have really got this to a perfect mirror finish, although it's pretty darn good now. Well, this isn't the end of our project because this is useless. What are you going to do? Lay it like this or whatever? So I'm going to clean up the mess from polishing this, and we're going to move on to the next step. Well, for the next step, I have a scrap piece of 1/2 inch thick oak, and I have cut or ripped one edge here at 45 degrees. I want to make a stand for this resin pour. So I've drawn out what I think will be a half decent stand for it. It's kind of like a plate stand. And what we're going to do is I've made a template. I'm going to lay my template with the flat edge against our 45 degree cut. And we're going to trace it out, making sure that we make a left and a right side. Then we're going to take it over to the scroll saw and we're going to cut it out. We'll now give each piece a good sanding, and then we can move on to the next step. You want to try to take off some of these sharp edges while you're sanding as well, just to soften them up a bit. And this is what you should have at this point in time. So what I want to do now is we need to assemble this stand, and I have these small little brass hinges. And the way that this assembles is that the 45 degree cuts will go together, and then we're going to place our hinges, it's a little awkward here, we're going to place our hinges right in here like this. We're going to mark it and we're going to screw them in place using small little brass screws. Now you just want to make sure that your edge here on the bottom lines up, and then you can screw everything in place. I'm going to have both hinges down here on the bottom half of my stand just to kind of keep them out of the way of the top end. And what this will allow this to do is when you're not using it or storing it, it will allow this to fold flat, just like this. You can recess them if you want. I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to basically surface mount them, and then when I get that done, I'll come back and I'll see you. And when you're done, you should have something that looks like this. And these 45s that meet here at the back, they stop it from opening any further and allow it to stay at a 90-degree angle. I would round this off once you open it, just sand this off a little bit. And all that's left to do now is display your child's craft that is sealed in the resin. And there you have it. Preserving your child's crafts in resin with a little bonus of a stand project there. Guys, truth be told, the original stand that I made for this heart was actually too big. It was too tall. I didn't like the look of it, and because of that, I ended up shrinking it down a little bit. However, that original stand works great as a plate stand. So what I'm going to do is, I know it's hard to tell you guys how to draw out that plate stand, so just like I did with the folding child's rocking chair, I'm going to offer up the PDF of my hand-drawn template for those plate stands or your craft stands. So I'll offer them both. All you guys got to do is let me know that you want them, drop a message on the channel's Facebook page, or you can send me an email at acutabove_woodworking@hotmail.com, and I'll be more than happy to send you guys the PDF. It's hand-drawn, remember that, but I'll send you the PDF so you can make your own templates of these plate stands, or in this case, a resin pour stand. Guys, this project was a ton of fun, and there was also some experimentation that went on there. When that back caused me problems and I couldn't get that really thin scrap plexi off of there, I ended up causing some damage to the back of the resin pour, and that kind of bothered me. And I've never used rubbing compound as an agent to polish resin, but I thought it would be worth a go. And if it didn't work, I was just going to leave the back frosted, and that would be it. I would have been fine with that, but as it turns out, that rubbing compound really worked well. I will be using it again. The stand, you don't have to make it 1/2 inch thick. You can make it thinner if you like. You can make it out of 3/8. You can make it out of a 1/4 inch. Whatever suits your project. You just have to remember that you're going to need the hardware, the screws, short enough to go into the thinner stock. In this case, I used a number 1 by 3/8 of an inch brass screw. That's a pretty tiny screw, and I had to use tweezers to hold on to it to get it started. I also had to use a jeweler's drill to be able to drill the pilot hole. Do not attempt to put brass screws into a wood like oak, maple, that sort of thing, without drilling a pilot hole first. You will twist that screw off and you will have just an absolute mess. So a pilot hole is a must. Guys, this concept is not new. This is not something that I came up with. People have been doing this for ages. I just did it here on the show to bring it to your attention in case you weren't aware of how to do it. It's a load of fun, and really, you got to give it a try. Now, even though my granddaughter is only 3 months old, I still cherish the little crafts that her mom makes and gives to me. They're a lot of fun. And although some of them are meant to kind of be disposable, and you know that over the years they're going to get destroyed, this project is a great way to permanently save it, to make it a permanent thing so that it never goes away. And unless someone physically takes it and throws that in the trash, well, that project's going to be around for a very long time, and it can be a cherished heirloom. Guys, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the bell so that you don't miss the notifications of future episodes of the show. I hope you've enjoyed today's project. It's been a load of fun for me, kind of a mixture of resin, woodworking, and, well, you know what, my granddaughter's little craft as well. Guys, I hope you're going to try this for yourself, and I also hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another Alternative Tuesdays.